Abraham and Lot are as these contrasted characters. First of all, they're both of the same stock. They're both of the same stock, so we can say that they are kindred. They are of the modern sense. We can say of the same race. We can say they're both, you know, from the same place, so forth and so on. Genesis chapter 2, verse 31 is significant there. They're subjected to the same environment. They grew up in the same place. Now, we find this very much so. Once again, we have to refer to Nigerian movies. Some of the Nigerian movies have these sort of, they're very interesting when you are conscious of the Ethiopic and the African Genesis. When you recognize that African Genesis and the Ethiopic Genesis, scripturally, biblically, then when you watch certain of these Nigerian movies, you find, at least we have, that we find that Abraham and Lot, sort of contrasted characters. They're the same stock. They're subject to the same environment. They both are justified men of their time. They are righteous men in their own time. Genesis chapter 15, verse 6, as well as 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 7 and verse 8. Now, the contrast in character, as well as the contrast in career, which career they chose. Now, you can find that sort of idea expressed a lot in movies. You understand? These sort of two people, same stock, same environment, same type of individuals, but there's a contrast now in their personal character, as well as there's contrast in what career they choose. And this is very much true for Abraham and Lot, and this is shown to be the result of their respective choices. So the key thing here is what they choose and the choices that they make at the crisis of their lives. When they're in the crisis of their lives, when each of us are in the crisis of our lives, the choices that we make are very, very significant. So we really need to consider this and to study this, even for that aspect, as it helps us to grow, as it helps us to mature. Now, according to the scripture, Lot, quote, he chose him all the plain of Jordanos. The Jordanos. He chose all of the plain of the Jordanos, of the Jordan, for present advantage. He chose this because he saw at the present time it is advantageous right now, for now, and this is why Lot chose what he chose. But Abraham, scripture teaches us, the Logos teaches us, that he looked for a city which hath foundations, according to Hebrew chapter 11, verse 10, that Abraham, he looked for a city. He looked for a katama. He looked for a city which hath foundations, which had a foundation. Or it says foundations here, but we'll check that out as we study this, because sometimes what we see plural in King James is sometimes singular in the Ethiopic and even in the Hebraic. But Hebrews 11 and 10 shows us that Abraham, he looked for a city. He looked for a city. So therefore, Yahweh appeared, and the vision, the connection with the vision, the Rai, you understand, the Rai contracted Ray, you understand, as once again a footnote on memory, our memory, and Abraham, he sat, you understand, in the plain of Mamre, or at the Adbar, at Mamre, at Memre's Adbar Zaf, at that tree. The tree, we can say, in a sense, figuratively, of the tree of life. And now Genesis chapter 13, verse 18, it says that he came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre. He came and he dwelt in the plain of Mamre. Now Mamre, in the English, Mamre Bamarinya, it means fatness. It means fatness. You understand? Which is in Hebron. Hebron, Chibret, andnet. Chibret means communion. Communion, common union. Hebron. You understand? So it's significant even according to the ancient mythos and the Ethiopic Genesis. You understand? And the true Hebraic overstanding to recognize the meanings in the names. The names, the Shem, the Shemot, the Semoch, the Semoch and the Shemoch, you understand, are very key and very significant. You understand? Some would call them the Asmat as well. But it's very significant what the names mean. And when we put the meanings to the names and see them in their true mythological or the mythos logical, the mythos, the story, and the logos, the word of truth, we can really understand what the spiritual, you understand, the real spirituality, as well as the simplicity, but in that simplicity there's great attention to details spiritually. Now the men, Abraham and Lot, they remain types of the spiritual, you understand, speaking of Abraham, and the worldly, speaking of Lot. So these men show us two contrasts, which is similar to Psalms. Psalms beginning in the Mezmor Dawit, the first Psalm of David. It shows us the two ways. The two ways. You understand? The two ways of individuals. And then the second Psalm shows the two ways of men and people when they come together as nations. It shows those two ways right there. And the contrast between Abraham and Lot, or Abraham and Lot, also shows us two ways. You understand? The worldly and the spiritual mitmanan. See, so they're both, when Scripture shows us that Lot is righteous, and we've been touching on this as we have been touching on the order of salvation. What is the plan of salvation? What are those key doctrines? There are certain key doctrines as well as key themes that we need to know. And we're seeking to share a way, to guide ones in a way, and to remind them about certain basic, take notes of certain basic principles and to apply them and to practice and perfect them for yourself. Because then when you know them for yourself, you'll be more confident in your walk as well as sharing them with others. The key is names. Names are very important. You understand, as we come across these various names. And what is righteousness within the context? A lot of people can't understand how Lot was righteous. In one version of the mythos, the so-called Masoretic Hebraic, they use a terminology called chesed, that Lot was chesed. You understand? There was here like the Hasidim, you understand, which is a very important reference to actually touch on. But we don't want to go off track with the sabbatical studies in this fourth Sabbath. So we want to continue with this overview of the chapters, you understand, of the chapters that consist of this fourth sabbatical Tegelet, or Vayera, where Asa Terayo, according to the Ethiopic. Now, that's the second aspect, Lot's last backsliding step. Now, when we get to Genesis chapter 20, because the reading is from chapter 18 to chapter 22 for this Sabbath, we get to chapter 20, we have Abraham's lapse, his lapse in faith at Gerar. You understand? Gerar, also another name that has a ancient kamite, you understand, kamite ring to it, you understand, ringtone to it. So Abraham's lapse at Gerar is referenced, and there's a reference there to Genesis 26 verses 6 to 32 as well. Then we come to chapter 21. In chapter 21 comes the birth of Yitzhak, very significant, the birth of Yitzhak, the birth of Isaac. And there's a footnote on this area, because in this particular chapter there's the bondwoman, you understand, the bondwoman, and her son is cast out. and we have touched on it. Hopefully the sisters, this is very important. This area is very important as we speak about Rastafari family values. And we need to address our family values, because a house is not built on the ground. A house is built on a woman. If you would understand, if you would be able to receive that. And it's very significant even when we address subject matters like so-called polygamy or plural marriages or concubines, and these are subject matters that come up, especially in Rastafari, and many have not really had the opportunity to become educated in the teachings of His Majesty and to really study these teachings and our own, to drink water from our own cistern. You understand? To drink water from our own cistern.